Good evening, staff, council, members of the public. May I have a mover and seconder to call the meeting to order, please? Councilors Moore and Deputy Cabral, but the regular meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater does now come to order at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Please join me in the singing of the national anthem. Oh, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all of us commend. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard. Councilor, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? Not seeing any. May I have a mover and seconder to call the public meeting to order? Councilors Garwood and Alexander, that this public meeting of council held under Section 12 of the Development Charges Act 1997 as amended to present and obtain public input on the proposed development charges, bylaw, and background study be called to order at 6:32 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Welcome to this public meeting of Springwater Township Council held in compliance with Section 12 of the Development Charges Act to give the public an opportunity to express their views regarding the proposed development charges DC bylaw and background study. The first part of the meeting is to present the development charges background study. Following this, the public will be given an opportunity to make an oral submission in person or virtually through Zoom. Any person wishing to make an oral submission must have notified the township prior to noon on this day and must have been added to the commenters list. All comments and questions should be addressed through the chair. Oral submissions will be included in this meeting's minutes and form part of the public record, including the name, address of the speaker, any information collected under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Privacy Act. The minutes of the meeting will be posted to the township website. I will now call upon the clerk to confirm the notice of the meeting and the dates which notice has been given.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Notice of this public meeting was published in the September 12th, 2024 edition of the Springwater News and in the October issue of the direct mailer. The notice was also placed on the township's website on October 5th, 2024 and circulated through the township's social media accounts.
Has the township received any correspondence in response to the notice of public meeting?
There's been no correspondence received for this public meeting.
I will now call on Watson Associates to give the presentation outlining the 2024 development charges background study and proposed development charges bylaw.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and pleasure to be before yourself and members of council. I have a brief presentation today to go through the findings of the development charges background study and bylaw update that we've undertaken in concert with working with township staff. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. And so the purpose of this public meeting is that it's a requirement under the Development Charges Act. And so really it's to provide an overview, a summary of the proposed charges and policies set out in the Development Charges Background Study, in this case, the update background study, and allow council to ask questions, allow the public to make representations and ask questions as well. And so as part of this, the entire public process, we've had to prepare a background study, the update study, and post that on the township's website at least 60 days prior to council passing an amending bylaw. That was uploaded on October 3rd to the township's website, and a little bit later in the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the timelines. Next slide, please. So for the members of the public and a general recap, development charges are used, they're a revenue tool used to recover the capital costs associated with new development in the municipality. And what we're trying to recover with these costs are the capital costs that are in addition to what a developer would normally pay for as part of their subdivision. And so we generally refer to these works as local service works. So typically, if you think of a subdivision, the internal roads, sewers, water main, sidewalks, etc., would typically be paid for by the developer directly. And then really what we're trying to recover with development charges is the broader infrastructure to connect the developments. We're empowered to impose these charges under the Development Charges Act, and that's what guides the preparation and calculation of the development charges bylaw. Next slide, please. So there's a lot that goes into the development charge calculation, but at a very high level, to summarize it, we take the capital costs associated with new development, divide it by the amount of development, and then we get a development charge per unit for residential growth and a development charge per square foot or per square meter for non-residential growth. Next slide, please. And so why are we doing this update study? So the township completed a development charge background study back in the summer of 2023, and that informed the current development charges bylaw. Since then, the province has released Bill 185, which has changed a number of the rules that were put into place by Bill 23. And so we'll talk a little bit about what those changes are. So in general, what we're trying to do here is to align the current development charges bylaw with the new changes. And as well, I'll talk a little bit about it. We're updating one of the project costs for the fire station. Next slide, please. And so I've broken this out into two slides, items that have already been addressed under Bill 185 that the township has already addressed. And then the next slide will be the kind of amendments as part of this process. And we've broken it up into two because what was included in Bill 185 was this process for minor amendments, which really helped reduce some of the red tape that municipalities had to go through in updating a development charge bylaw. And so this simplified process allows us to update the bylaw to add development charges for studies, to remove the mandatory phase-in that was required under Bill 23, and to extend the expiry date. And so with this simplified process, we don't need to undertake a background study. We don't need to undertake a public meeting or public process, and those changes are not appealable to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And so because of that, the township was able to remove the phase-in, that mandatory phase-in that we had to adhere to, where we could only charge 80% of our calculated charge in the first year, and then 85 in the second year, 90, 95, then 100. Luckily with Bill 185, that was removed. So as of July 3rd, 2024, that has been removed. The township also brought forth a change to incorporate growth-related studies. So Bill 23 said we were no longer allowed to include growth-related studies, such as the development charge study itself, in the calculation. That was repealed by Bill 185. And so as of today, through a previous council report, growth-related studies were added to the charges. And kind of somewhat of a minor change is that they've modernized public notice requirements for municipalities that don't have a newspaper of record in their municipality. You can now post your public notices on the website, and that will meet the requirements of the Act, as the Act still does refer to public notice in a newspaper. Next slide, please. And so those were things we could change through the minor amendment process, but we do need to undertake this more formal process to do a study, a public meeting, and passage of the bylaw to change this rate freeze. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a couple slides. In addition to that, I mentioned there was an update to the cost of one of the projects. That's the Midhurst Fire Station. We got actual tender costs, and so we were able to update the calculation for that. Again, talk a little bit more about that in subsequent slides. So next slide, please. And so just to kind of recap, the minor amendment processes are complete. And now this is to deal with the formal amendment. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of dates floating on here. But the key dates that we're looking at now is that as of today, the minor amendment for growth-related studies is in effect. So that charge for growth-related studies, and I'll show you what that looks like. And then we're undertaking this public meeting as part of the process for the formal amending bylaw updates, and then council, it's anticipated to consider the amending bylaw on December 4th. So that gives us our 60 days from the October 3rd release of the background study. Next slide, please. Okay, so for those formal amendments, the two things we changed, under the previous legislation, when a site plan or zoning bylaw amendment application comes forward, when they submit their application, their rate is frozen as of that date. The municipality will go through, review the application, approve the application, and once the application's approved, the developer then had 2 years to pull the building permits related to that application, and they got their rate frozen all the way back at the time when they submitted their application. The change here is that the province has shortened that 2-year timeframe to 18 months. Unfortunately, we technically are not allowed to change this very minor component of the bylaw through the quick amendment process, so we had to incorporate it with this formal process. The other component was the updated capital cost estimate for the Midhurst Fire Station. So back in the 2023 background study, we had estimated about $8.9 million in total costs for this project. The actual tender came in and it was $12.2 million. And so we're able to go in and update the development charge calculation for fire services. Next slide, please. And so the impact on the charge, and what we wanted to show you here, and this is for a single detached home. The first column shows what the charge was prior to our changes in 2023. And so you can see for fire services, our charge was $3,200 per single detached unit. When we undertook the bylaw analysis in 2023, the charge for fire services actually decreased. A number of factors, the growth forecast we were looking at, and the other capital costs that comprise the calculation, and so the charge decreased. And so now with this updated capital cost estimate, you can see we're increasing slightly back up to $2,488 per unit, which is still less than what it was before we undertook the bylaw in 2023. For growth studies, again, this was already passed and approved and is being implemented as of today. The charge is going from $288 under the old bylaw. But now that we've updated the calculations, incorporated the studies, that goes up to $391 per unit. Next slide, please. And a very similar story for the non-residential charges. You can see for fire services, it went from $14.67 down to $10.87, and then back up slightly to $11.95. And for growth studies, you can see it went from $1.39 up to $1.94. Next slide, please. And with that, that concludes my presentation. The next step would be for happy to answer any questions if there is any delegations from the public. And then once this formal public meeting is concluded, council will consider the bylaw amendment on December 4th. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I will now call upon the clerk to provide the number of people who have registered to ask questions or make comments regarding the building permit fees review and suggested amendments.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. There have been no commenters registered to ask questions or make comments regarding this DC public meeting.
Thank you, Lynn. And are there any members here with us this evening who wish to have comment or question? And I will now turn to members of council for comments or questions. And not seeing any. Thank you to all who participated in the public meeting with respect to the proposed development charges bylaw and underlying background study and for showing an interest in this matter. May I have a mover and seconder to adjourn the public meeting, please? I have Councillors Fisher and Moore that this public meeting held under Section 12 of the Development Charges Act of 1997 as amended to present and obtain a public input and proposed development charge bylaw background study does now adjourn at 6:45 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. May I have a mover and seconder for the direction following the public meeting, please? I have Councillors Thompson and Deputy Cabral that subject to comments received in the public meeting held under Section 12 of the Development Charges Act 1997 as amended to present and obtain public input on the proposed development charges bylaw background study and bylaw as be submitted to council for consideration and approval on the November 20th, 2024. Are there any questions or discussion on this?
Mayor Coughlin, it should be December 4th meeting.
December 4th. My apologies, a bylaw to be submitted to council for consideration and approval on November 4th, 2024. No, 6th.
December 4th.
December 4th. All right, it was the date.
Yes, sorry.
One more time. December 4th. And not seeing any comments or questions, all those in favor? And that has carried. Thank you. We don't have any deputations or presentations, and at this time I will turn to question period, and I will turn to Clerk Marshall. Have there been any submissions received?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. There have been no question period submissions for this evening's meeting.
Thank you. I will now turn to members of the public. This is the open question period. Members of the public are given 2 minutes to ask a question to council, and at this time, if you do have a question, you may come forward. Not seeing anything. I will move now on to our minutes. May I have a mover and seconder to approve the council minutes, please? I have councillors, Garwood and Alexander, that the minutes of council listed herein be approved as presented. 1, the minutes of the regular meeting of council of October 16th, 2024. 2, the minutes of the special meeting of council, October 16th, 2024. And 3, the minutes of special meeting of council, closed session of October 16th, 2024. Council, do we have any comments or questions on these minutes? All those in favor? And that has carried. We will now move on to our minutes of boards and committee. May I have a mover and seconder to receive the board and committee minutes, please? I have councillors Thompson and Moore that the minutes of the board and committee and organizations listed herein be received for information. And we have the Cultural and Heritage Advisory Committee minutes of August 13th, 2024. Are there any questions or comments on these minutes? I'm not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. We will now move on to our budget. I will ask for a mover and seconder, and then I will turn to Director Bedard for that. So may I have a mover and seconder for the proposed 2025-26 budget and business plan? Councillors Alexander and Garwood, that the report from the Director of Finance regarding the proposed 2025-26 budget and business plan dated November 6, 2024 be received, and that the proposed 2025 tax budget operating budget, proposed 2025 water operating budget, proposed 2025 wastewater operating budget, and the proposed 2025 capital budget as presented November 6th be referred to the special budget meetings of council for deliberation and consideration. Welcome, Director Bedard, and please begin.
Table the 2025 budget and officially kick off budget season. The purpose of this evening's presentation is to provide council and the public with highlights with respect to the township's proposed 2025 work plan and to refer the discussion relating to the budget to future special meetings of council. Therefore, staff are requesting the proposed 2025 budget be received and referred to the special council meetings for further discussion and deliberation. Next slide, please. Tonight's presentation will include a high-level review of the township's proposed 2025 consolidated budget. This budget is comprised of 4 key components, including the tax-supported operating budget, water and wastewater budgets, and capital. Secondly, we'll review the new initiatives or service enhancements that are being proposed as 2025 program changes. And lastly, we'll review the budget timelines as well as the items that council is required to consider tonight. Next slide, please. As previously discussed, the township's consolidated budget is comprised of the following components. The tax-supported operating budget. This includes the programs and services that are funded from property taxation, reserves, and user fees. Some examples of the programs and services that fall into this budget are roads maintenance, winter maintenance, fire and emergency services, parks and recreation, by law enforcement, and police. Next, the water and wastewater rate-supported operating budget. This includes programs and services that are funded from water and wastewater reserve funds, as well as their respective user fees. Only those residents that have municipal water and/or wastewater services available to them are impacted by this budget. Lastly, the capital budget and 10-year capital plan. This includes capital projects staff have proposed the township undertake to construct, renew, or acquire assets to deliver programs and services. In conclusion, the 2025 proposed base budget requires a net tax levy increase of approximately 2.8 million, as shown on the slide in front of you. This equates to a 14% increase over last year. There are various factors relating to this increase, both in terms of pressures that the township faces, as well as pressures that the township service partners face. Of the 2.8 million net increase, approximately 58% of this is largely related to unavoidable operating costs, such as compensation, utilities, equipment and fleet repair and maintenance, fuel, insurance, and policing. These operating pressures are detailed within the accompanying council report on tonight's agenda, and they are also detailed within the 2025 budget book that will be released later this evening. The remaining 42% represents council's commitment to infrastructure renewal and replacement that is recommended to be funded from taxation. Sustained infrastructure renewal efforts require a dedicated funding source, and this funding source is property taxation. Included within the 2025 budget are projects to meet council's 3.5 million annual road rehabilitation spending target. Taxation funding is also recommended for the annual facility building condition assessment program. And lastly, this also includes the 1% compounding infrastructure levy. So in conclusion, when we look at that 2.8 million, approximately 58% relate to the largely unavoidable operating costs that the township faces, and the 42 represent an enhancement or the recommended funding for capital in order to meet goals that we have been set to achieve. Next slide, please. Moving to the impact on the average residential taxpayer. In 2025, the average single-family detached residential property within the township will have an assessed value of $497,000. This property will see an estimated blended increase in taxes of $367 or 8.31% over 2024. The estimated blended increase takes into consideration a 4% County of Simcoe tax rate increase, as well as no change to the education tax rate. Overall, the proposed 2025 budget translates to an increase of $30.60 per month, or $73.89 per 100,000 of residential assessment. And also, just for context, to tie this slide back to the previous one, a 1% township-only tax rate increase in 2025 represents $190,000 in additional revenue to the township to deliver programs and services. Next slide, please. In summary, the proposed estimated blended tax increase is 8.31%. Again, $367 for the average residential home assessed at $497,000. Next slide, please. Moving to the rate-supported budget. As mentioned, this budget includes water and wastewater operating budgets. The rate-supported budgets have been prepared factoring in council's resolution with respect to the 2023 water and wastewater rate study. The recommendation stipulates a 4% water rate increase and a 10% wastewater rate increase from 2024 through 2028. Revenue calculations have been built with this rate increase in mind. And again, just to confirm, only residents that have provided these services, water and wastewater from the township, will be affected by these rate increases. Next slide, please. Moving to capital, the proposed 2025 capital budget, which forms the first year of the 10-year capital plan, is comprised of gross expenditures in the amount of approximately 56 million. As shown in the chart, most of the capital plan is focused on roads and municipal buildings. A list of major capital project categories is included in the council report on today's agenda, and each project is detailed within the budget book to be released tonight. Major projects budgeted for 2024 include Craig Road, Fire Station 2, and various road resurfacing projects throughout the township necessary to meet council's 3.5 million annual spending target on road resurfacing. Next slide, please. The proposed 2025 capital budget is also forecasting matching funding sources in the amount of approximately 56 million. Most of these funds are to be drawn from development charges, and this aligns with the major growth projects the township is undertaking, namely Craig Road and Fire Station 2. The township is also proposing to take on debt for the portion of these projects that are not funded through development charges. Debt is also proposed for major transportation network infrastructure renewal projects, such as projects associated with 2 township bridges and our larger road resurfacing projects. Lastly, and impacting the tax increase as detailed earlier, the 2025 capital budget proposes to fund 1.3 million more in taxation on capital projects than 2024. So that's an additional investment in capital that I've referred to earlier. It is anticipated that this level of taxation funding will need to increase in the future in order to sustainably fund council's annual target on road resurfacing. Next slide, please. The proposed 10-year capital plan relating to growth is comprised of gross expenditures in the amount of 205.9 million. The majority of these expenditures relate to roads and related infrastructure and municipal buildings. This is mainly due to Craig Road and the Community Hub projects. A detailed 10-year capital plan for growth is included within the 2025 budget book. Next slide, please. The proposed 10-year capital plan relating to growth and how it's being funded is comprised significantly from development charges, and this is a direct result of the infrastructure needed to support the anticipated growth within the township. This amount totals 161 million. The second largest contribution is debt at 40 million, and this ties back into the previous comment on we're funding these projects that aren't fully funded from development charges from debt. Next slide, please. The proposed 10-year capital plan for capital renewal and replacement has gross expenditures in the amount of 74.4 million, and this is primarily associated with roads and related infrastructure, followed by fleet and equipment and municipal buildings. This 10-year plan represents the costs associated with renewing and replacing infrastructure that the township currently owns and is currently responsible for providing services and programs. Next slide. The proposed 10-year capital plan for renewal and replacement is comprised of funding sources matching 74.4 million. This capital plan, however, relies to various extents on all tools in the township's toolbox with respect to funding capital renewal and replacement. Debt, reserves, reserve funds, government grants, and increased support and taxation will play key roles in funding asset renewal and replacement in the future. Next slide. In addition to the township's proposed base budget, staff are proposing 13 service enhancements, otherwise known as program changes, for council's consideration. A detailed justification sheet for each program change is included within the budget book, so the council is able to review each program change on their own merit. Please note this slide provides a high-level list of the township's proposed program changes and their proposed impact. The impact is on the township-only increase, and this represents 5.12%. Next slide, please. Further to the township's program changes, 2 of the township service partners have program changes for council's consideration. The nature of these program changes will be discussed during the service partner presentation component of the township's budget deliberation process. With respect to the South Georgian Bay physician recruitment, the amount proposed is a placeholder. After receiving an update with respect to new initiatives proposed for the catchment area that this organization serves, it's my understanding that during their portion of the budget deliberation process, the change may total 6,000 instead of the 4,000 I've noted here. The impact of service partner program changes on the township only tax increase is 0.57%. Next slide. Lastly, the budget timeline is presented for your review. I would like to take this time to encourage and recommend members of council to take advantage of the one-on-one sessions offered next week. It's these one-on-one sessions where you can meet with myself or senior leadership, all of us collectively, and we can really dive into the budget, help you gain that understanding of the proposed budget that is before you today. After the one-on-ones, service partner presentations will take place on November 18th, followed by 3 days of budget deliberations, November 20th, 25th, and 27th, with the goal of wrapping up and approving the budget on December 4th. Next slide. So, in closing, staff are requesting the council consider the following motion with respect to the proposed 2025 budget and refer future discussion to the special budget meetings held later this month. And with that, this concludes my presentation for this evening.
Thank you. I like that you kicked it off with budget season. Seems to be one of those. So council, at this time, if there's any high level questions or questions on the proceedings that are before us, I can turn to members of council now. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Coughlin. Director Bedard, can you please explain, because I need to say that I have received no less than 25 emails, text messages, phone calls about the budget. So since it being put on our agenda, so residents are really concerned. Can you explain if we are looking at an 8% or a 14%? And very clearly, please.
Thank you. If you can elaborate on the blended portion.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through you to Councillor Moore. The budget is, or the tax bill that taxpayers receive is comprised of 3 different levies: the township levy, the county levy, and the education levy. When we are building the township budget, we focus primarily on the impact to the township budget. So we look at the increase in spending. So the township increase is 14% roughly, but the township only equates to 52% of a property owner's tax bill. So when you take the township portion, which is approximately 14%, and divide that by what the total taxes our property owner will pay, that brings us down to the 8%. It would if we were able to pull up that chart with the breakdown, it might help visually explain.
Director Bedard, do you have the slide number by chance?
Slide 4, please.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So if we look at the Township of Springwater levy, and we see the increase of $307.67, the increase of 14.16% relates to the 307 over the township levy of 2,479. So you can see we're taking that 300 and we're dividing it by 2,400. When we divide the 367 total tax bill over the much larger tax levy of 4,788, that's how we arrive at the 8.31.
Thank you. I'll try and use some layman terms here for you. So residents only pay one tax bill, and our one tax bill, if this was proposed at as is, it would be the 8.31%, which would be the experience and the increase that residents would be paying. So the 14.16 is our portion when blended with the county of Simcoe. So the 14.6 And the school board, I think, I don't know the last time there was an increase, but it's been zero in all of my experience anyway, but there is only one tax increase and it's a blended rate. So as being proposed, the increased rate, while the township only really has control of our own budget, our residents would experience an 8.31% as proposed this evening. Follow up, Council Moore.
Thank you. Director Bedard, I have to say the budget's concerning. The way it's presented at 8% is really concerning. I would hope that our mayor and deputy mayor would go back to the county and ask for a reconsideration on what their 4% is down to the municipalities. Because I think that's a large pill for us to swallow. The 15 positions is a lot to assume as well. So respectfully, I won't be receiving the budget this evening, but I would hope that you could take it back and bring it to us with something a little bit more palatable.
Yeah, and Councilor Moore, through with those comments and Deputy Cabral and I can take those away. But when we do sit at the county table, we're charged as a county councillor. We took an oath at the county level, and 4% municipalities and counties are not immune to inflation or increases. So I think that while the conversation at the county table sometimes becomes we need to decrease the county costs to allow for more room at the lower tier, there's still a responsibility to ensure that what needs to happen at the county is moving forward. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, and I respect that. But I did sit in on the budget meeting at the county last week, and I did hear another mayor say, I cannot take this budget back to my municipal council. And I did respect that. And I thought, good for you for standing up. And I thought if enough of county council said the same thing, then they would take it back and relook at the downloading, because it's a big ask, what they're asking for as well.
I have Councillors Fisher and then Thompson.
Just a comment and then two questions for Mr. Bedard. Going back to what we were saying about the county, absolutely the county is not immune to increases as well. But, one thing that some of my residents have come back to me with in shock, 160% pay increase for councillors at the county. I mean, even Premier Doug Ford, and I'll quote him, they need to stop blowing taxpayers' money and be more responsible. And he likened it to a fox guarding the hen house. So, although there are increases, I think the wage increase was really what residents came to me about. So. I don't know if that's something you can take back, but it's certainly something that concerns my residents, and I think a lot of Springwater residents, because that's directly affecting them positively, not the taxpayer. Anyway, my questions for Director Bedard, just for clarification, and I know the base rate of a $497,000 home is used to calculate these. For example, $30 a month is based upon, or $1 a day is based upon a $497,000 home. And it has been for some time, as long as I've been watching council and on council. When the MPAC reassessment happens and the $497,000 home becomes a more realistic $1.5 million home, can you tell residents what would happen to that $30, if it were, in this case, in this example, 3 times as much?
Director Bedard.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through you to Councillor Fisher. When MPAC completes its next reassessment, say your property value goes from 500 to 1.5 million, that does not mean that you'll be paying 3 times more taxes. What happens is it will redistribute the burden. So if your property increases more than the average property in the township, you will pay more taxes. If your property decreases in value less than the average property, you will pay less. But just because your property is reassessed at a higher value does not necessarily mean that you will be paying more township taxes. The reassessment is less impactful when factored into a budget increase. The budget increase will always have more of an impact on taxes payable rather than the reassessment. So it's generally a myth that is thrown out there that my property will triple in value on reassessment, my taxes will triple. And I'm here to say that is entirely not true. It all depends on how the property of your value changes in relation to the average property assessment.
So just,
Follow on, Counselor?
yes, so just to clarify though, their taxes still would go up. It doesn't necessarily mean triple, but that individual's taxes would still increase more than $30. It wouldn't go down.
Director Bedard?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through you to Councillor Fisher, it depends on that change in average. Again, just because the property is reassessed, it does not, again, mean that they're going to pay more taxes. It would depend, you know, if, say, it's a desirable property and it increases more than the average residential property increases within the township, that property will be paying more because it's higher assessed compared to the average. But again, just because the reassessment leads to a higher property value, again, does not mean that the property owner will pay more taxes.
Thank you for that. And I think sometimes the understanding is when someone, for example, when we built a shop at our house, our MPAC assessment went up, so our individual property taxes went up. However, when MPAC does finally get around to doing an Ontario-wide reassessment, it's not going to be the same impact because it will be spread out across everybody. But yes, when MPAC does finally reassess almost a decade later, there's going to be a significant impact to our residents. That's something we just know that's going to happen. But it's not going to be in the same way that if you put on an addition or added a basement apartment, that's individual reassessment. Whereas when MPAC does the assessment, it's going to be Ontario wide. I think that's something that needs to be made clear as well. Final follow on again, and then I do have Councillors Thompson
And anyway, I'll leave that one alone for now, but I'm just going back to the portion with the capital budget. We seem to be banking on a lot of development charges. I think I saw about $27 million. We're banking on that seemingly in our budget, but we haven't collected that money yet. And in my eyes, we're not guaranteed that money in this year. Can you speak to that?
Director Bedard?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through you too, Councillor Fisher. You know, you are correct when you say we haven't collected that money. A future report on this matter was requested, I believe, at the last council meeting, and we'll be presenting our 5-year plan for development charges and funding those capital projects, as well as the impact on if it's not funded, you know, while we would have to short-term borrow or interim finance to complete that. So we are working on reporting on that matter back to council, and that will come in early 2025.
Thank you. And before I do go to Councillor Thompson, I just wanted to follow up on Councillor Fisher's comments about our county deliberations that have been quite hefty with regards to the compensation and composition of county council. Deputy Cabral and myself spoke quite, I'm going to say, in favor of a reduction in the size, and also against the increase being provided today. So the vote that was cast from the township was recorded in that we are not in favor of members of county council today receiving any increase, and did speak to the fact that we knew what our salary was when we signed up for the job. So the vote from Springwater Township was a no on that one. Councillor Thompson.
Through the chair to Director Bedard. So Director Bedard, what, if any, will the impact be if we don't receive the budget tonight? Was it going to slow down the process? Will it stop the processes, or just symbolic?
Director Bedard?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through you to Councillor Thompson, I believe we would await your further direction with respect to how you wish to proceed with budget deliberations.
That was we are at the will of council. Councillor Alexander?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I just more have a comment and know that just because you're sitting in the seat, it's not directed at you, Director Bedard, but it is kind of directed in overall at the budget. So while I do agree that you know, I understand the blended rate and the county portion I have concerns with. But really what I'm looking at this from my perspective is what the 7 of us control at this table, and that is the township budget. So when I'm looking at that, I'm looking at a 14% increase. And then when I'm looking at 13 program changes, I'm looking at just under a 20% increase. For the taxpayers of Springwater is essentially what we're asking. This will be my 3rd budget. The first 2 budgets, removing any program change, was a fight at this table, I found. Which means really that's what I'm looking at is 20%. And I think that is just completely out of touch with the economic climate of the country, the province, and this township. People are on fixed incomes, people even not on fixed incomes. Prices are going up, asking people to take on 20%. I've searched for this word over the past 5 days since I've seen this, and the word that it keeps coming back to is insanity. That is what I think. So I truly hope that when we dive into this binder and we get to have the discussions with staff, that staff are willing to have the open, hard conversations and very much prioritize what they really need and what is required versus the wants.
I have Deputy Cabral, Garwood, and then back to Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Can you possibly bring up the slide there, the original one that showed the increase overall? And the reason I want to pop that one up there is I want some clarification with respect to the actual percentage that it's going up, because we're talking about the taxation piece that everybody's going to pay, and also lumped in there was the water and wastewater. Those numbers were all added up at the bottom, and that's what translated into the increase, the taxation increase. So if I'm just trying to figure out how it is that they can both be combined into one taxation increase, the 8.31%, and at the same time be told that the folks that are paying water and wastewater are the ones that will be paying for that, and the other component just taxes, everybody's going to be paying that. So I'm just trying to figure out how we can lump them both together and come up with this increase when some people are going to be paying for some and some people are going to be paying for all. So that's my first question.
Dr. Bedard?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Deputy Cabral. If I could ask the clerk to back up one more slide, please. When we look at this budget that arrives at the 2.8 million increase, this is our consolidated budget, and the water and rate supported budget in the middle, those are balanced to each other. So we have consolidated everything for simplicity on one page. Granted that only if you are on the water and wastewater services and have those provided to you, you will only be impacted by that rate increase. So really this one slide is to show council that our gross expenditures are approaching 91.8 million, that we are very quickly becoming a $100 million annual budget. And that's really the point of this one, is to show you the annual spend that we're proposing. And when we move this into the tax increase, that tax increase is for all property owners, the 2.8 million. And then if you were on the water or wastewater services, you would have that respective increase as well.
Deputy Cabral?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Thank you for that. I would prefer to see the wastewater separate, to be quite honest with you. That's something that not all the taxpayers are paying, but this slide with that rate in it showing those there, to be quite frank, is a bit misleading because it tends to lump everything together. So that's why I'm asking for the clarification. And if I'm asking for it, I would suspect there might be residents out there that are looking at the slide or looked at the agenda and they're basically asking the same question. You know, if you're lumping it all together, you're still coming up with one number. My next question is with respect to the projections. I've always struggled with the idea of looking into the future and taking a lump of money there, and then applying it to the budget at the beginning before any of those dollars are in hand. And I've always asked for a a differentiation between the two. I would like to know what the number is when we don't look into what has in the past been called supplementary funding or supplementary revenues. I don't know what it's really called. I think it's called future assessment that we're anticipating to get. When we take that number out of there, because that's not a guaranteed number in my mind, and it never has been, and I just simply relate down to Vaughan when they had that fire that basically hundreds of homes went up in flames, those DCs evaporated with those homes, I would suspect. We don't know what's happening here. I don't know how many houses are being actually built. From what I see economically and in the housing market right now, it's not going the way everybody thought it was going to go when we started trying to build more houses. So my fear is those dollars might not actually materialize. So I like to know what the real number is without looking at those dollars down the pipe. So I don't know if you're able to provide that now. If you eliminate those imaginary dollars coming down the pipe and apply it to this, I don't know what the tax increase would be, but it'd be probably in the neighborhood of 20%, not 14. So that's a comment I'd like to make. Can you maybe tell us exactly what it would be if we take those imaginary dollars out?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through you to Deputy Cabral. There's, I think, two distinct pieces you were talking about, and my preference would be to prepare some material and have this discussion November 20th more in depth with you. What I can provide right now is there's assessment growth within the township, and we know the assessment base is growing because there's new residents, there's new businesses, and these are popping up every year. So as the assessment base grows, we can generate more taxation revenue without having to increase the tax rate. So in 2025, we're able to generate an additional $700,000 worth of taxation revenue without increasing the tax rate. And that's just through the natural cycle of your township grows, you have more taxpayers, your assessment base increases. And as that increases, you don't necessarily have to raise your tax rate to generate the same amount of revenue because you have that bigger pie for which you can generate taxation revenue from.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other piece is the supplemental tax revenue. And this is more that forward component. You know, what is that future growth going to look like within our municipality? And what are we budgeting for on an annual basis for growth that will occur in the future? And in this year's budget, that's approximately 200,000.
And on that piece, that's the part that I struggle with is the part where we're looking down a pipe and projecting that we're going to have these extra dollars and we're using those extra dollars in the future to offset this budget at the very beginning. And my crystal ball doesn't work quite that well. So I would like to know without those dollars that we're anticipating to get, because that's a number that could go up or down, and we have had surpluses in the past. But I'd like to know what the number is without those imaginary dollars. And I guess also in respect of that is when we talk about the dollars that don't show up, we're talking about taking on debt to service the budget if those dollars don't materialize. And taking on the debt costs money too. So I do have some issues with that. So what I would like to see is two numbers. One, the number that we have here with respect to all of the funding sources that you've put in place. I'd also like to see a number that does not include what we anticipate we're going to have 6 months, 8 months, 10 months down the road to satisfy the budget today. So is that something that could be done? Because they've done it in the past during the budget deliberations. I'd like to see it happen again. Thank you.
Bedard?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through you to Deputy Cabral, we could pull this information together and present it as part of our November 20th budget deliberation or departmental presentations for you.
Thank you for that. And I just want to comment on imaginary dollars and crystal balls. And I'm sure that the shock to our residents of the larger numbers than we've seen here in a decade have tuned in many people. And I don't want there to be a lack of confidence throughout our community in that it's not crystal balls and it's not imaginary dollars. And I parallel this to when in my own profession or my husband's profession, if we get a job and the job's going to take place in a couple months, we have to buy material, we have to hire staff, we have to invest, we have to spend money before we get paid for doing the job. We have to invest in our own company. So although the money is not here yet, I don't consider it imaginary dollars or crystal balls. It's forecasting. We are a business. We're a public sector business. I do have councillors Garwood and Fisher, but I do see CO Schmidt. So Councillor Garwood, I'm just going to turn to CO Schmidt and then back to you.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to members of council on the supplementary revenue. So I would just echo some of the comments here. Every year, the township provides a report, our finance department provides a report to council on omits and supplementaries. And so that is actual revenue we've received on a go forward on an annual basis. Since I've been here, which has been just over 10 years, we've always had supplementary revenue, and hence we take that information into consideration and we project what we think is going to happen in the coming year to assist with trying to ensure that we're not overtaxing the taxpayer. So we know we're going to get supplementary revenue. The question is how much we're going to get. So if you want to talk about a number, that's probably the conversation we can talk about. But I can pretty much guarantee you we're going to get supplementary revenue in 2025. And I would also say, some of the other comments here, senior management is well aware of what's being presented to council here tonight. We've gone through a number of conversations about this budget. We are here to present to you our best professional advice. We ask that, you've just received your budget binders here today, haven't had the opportunity to really dig in. I would respectfully ask that you give us the opportunity to engage in more discussions with you next week, one-on-ones, as well as through our deliberation meetings later this month, so we can really unpack what's being presented to members of council so that we can hopefully better inform you as to what are some of the pressures and challenges that the municipality is facing. And again, ultimately, the final decision will be council, but I think in my opinion, it would be premature for council not to allow us to continue to have the conversation. There's pressures. They're not going to go away. The number hopefully is not going to be the number what you're seeing tonight, but we need to educate you on why the number is what it is tonight. There's a lot there. And Director Bedard has done his best tonight, but the intent was tonight is really just to table it, officially table the budget, and let's proceed into deliberations. We can have as many meetings as you want. We've outlined 3 thus far. If you want to have more into December and January, we're at your call to try to get to a figure or get to a budget, if you will. I wouldn't say figure, but a budget that you can agree upon. So those are my comments.
Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through you to Director Bedard. Thank you for the presentation. If I could ask, moving forward in and proceeding towards our budget deliberations, I think it's helpful for not only this council but also the public to have reference on previous years' increases as well. I believe we've had that in years past during budget deliberations. Understanding it is this council's 3rd deliberation together. Some members have had a couple more years as well on council to go through those budget experiences, but also comparator municipalities, specifically in the area, specifically similar size municipalities. I think also supports our conversations and aids us in those efforts. But again, I think as we all were when we look at a report and we see these numbers, yes, it is alarming. But I think that also is a great example that somebody said it before. This municipality is not immune to the costs that are out in the world that we're all paying with our families and day-to-day life. I went to the grocery store the other day and I couldn't believe the cost of it. So again, I believe not tabling this budget and not accepting the information is irresponsible. None of us have had an opportunity to look through a couple hundred pages of information. We received this 30 minutes ago. So we need to give the community an opportunity to reach out to us and share their concerns or their feedback or their support. We need to take the time to appropriately review this information and give staff the same opportunity to do so. So tabling the budget tonight does not mean you are supporting the budget, as we all know. As CEO Schmidt just noted and took the words out of my mouth, we have to give the opportunity to move forward and have a discussion and get to a point that is respectful and effective and will not result in this municipality having to cut services. Again, nobody wants to increase costs. I truly believe the 7 of us, when we decided to do this job, we did not come into it to cost the taxpayer more money. That is not anyone's intention here. But we also know the gas for my car to get here also costs more today than it did a year ago. So do the expenses that are being brought forward here today. We consistently speak of the level of service that our residents expect, and I completely agree. It's up here. So if we want it to remain here or increase, then we need to respectfully go through this budget, give staff the opportunity, spend the time with staff, deliberate. I think Councillor Alexander noted that we have some passionate conversations at this table. We have in the past, and we should. There's nothing wrong with that, especially when it comes to program changes. So again, I'm eager to get through this and get this process started, and hope the rest of council feels the same way.
Councillors Fisher and then Moore.
Just going back to what Councillor Garwood had just said, absolutely. When we all go to the gas pumps in the grocery store, I think we're all shocked, as a matter of fact. But I think that speaks to the almost audacity of this increase or proposed increase. I don't think anyone, including myself, got a 14% raise this year to keep up with inflation. And, I too have received multiple phone calls and engagement from the public, ranging from the young family who talks about sports for their kids, right? And how that's becoming expensive and they're weighing it out and they're concerned about taxation. And quite honestly, some fairly heartfelt conversations with retirees, people who built their homes in my ward back in the 80s and 90s, and they're on fixed incomes. So, I have a really tough time accepting this. I'm debating maybe staff should take this back and revamp it for us. I don't feel like taking a car for a test drive when I have no intention of buying it. And I sort of feel like that's what we're being asked to do, to, kick it down the road, as it were. I'm a taxpayer before I was a counselor, and I'll be a taxpayer after I'm done. And I represent taxpayers right now. And this increase, on top of a county increase, is it's too much for me to take. And I can tell you, my residents, the ones that I represent and I was elected for, the well will run dry, and I think a lot of them are very concerned. And I can tell you, the most heartfelt ones were seniors who were concerned. People who've owned their houses for 30 years, and they're telling me, divulging to me, what their monthly income is, and hundreds of dollars does cut into it, right? Don't be fooled by a large house sometimes. So I have a hard time accepting increases like this and just saying we'll discuss it later on.
Thank you for that. And I don't think anybody wanted to see a number like this. But I do agree that it's across the board, and you did say kick it down the road. And I think that kicking it down the road is what got us here. I think that when staff has come forward years prior with a 6%, a 5%, and we've cut it down to 0 and 1 and 0 and 2, that is what's led us to a 14. I will not make this my children's problem. I think that we need to be responsible. I think that the program changes have been outlined, but the initial 14% is not a wish list. It is the cost of doing business. It's the cost of providing the services our residents and the level of service our residents have come to anticipate. So I just want to be clear that it's unfortunate that we're here, but we do need to have that conversation. Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So by referring this budget back to staff is actually what I see as an opportunity to fine tune your asks, knowing full well that in a week from now, we're going to be arguing about not approving at the 8%. So it's not really kicking it down the road. It's an opportunity to relook at your ask, come back to us, and know that a reasonable ask where we still maintain our committed level of services will be adhered to. But an 8% is going to be a lot of back and forth, and it's not reasonable. And it is you that knows best what you need. But keeping in mind, we are on a very, very, very tight shoestring.
Deputy Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I just gonna step back here a little bit, and I'm not meaning to be offending anybody, but the last two budgets, the reality is that they both went through. The only thing they didn't get last year was one position, which was an augmented position. Wasn't like we let anybody go. And the budget before that was based on the service delivery review and the comprehensive review that Township did in order to assess what positions needed assistance in that. So to suggest that, you know, we had these short ones and then all of a sudden we're playing catch up, I have to respectfully disagree there. I think the last 2 years since this council has been in place, and even the last year of the last one, staff actually got pretty much what they asked for. I think it's reasonable that if staff has presented this budget, and I certainly respect CAO Schmidt and Director Bedard in their comments with respect to sitting around and saying, hey, this is the budget we're going to put forward to council. But what we're hearing now is that this particular one, and it has got residents making comments. There's people here that, I mean, to be quite frank with you, we've sat here in the past when there's been nobody in the gallery at all during this particular stage. And the fact that there might be 10 people here or 12 people here certainly gives me the sense that folks are concerned. I don't know if it's inappropriate to suggest to staff that maybe you're in a position to sharpen your pencil a wee bit, or maybe in a position to delay some asks so that when you come back, it might be a little bit more palatable with a reduced rate for us to work with, rather than, as Councillor Moore says, we have the back and forth and we start cutting things arbitrarily that maybe are more important to staff than what we know. I don't know whether or not in my previous life, there were budgets that we created, all the departments created them, and quite frankly, there was always something that could be removed from it to reduce the overall impact on the budget that went before council at a later date. And I'm talking about when I was in the city of Barrie. When we relate this organization to a business, I don't know if it works exactly the same way. We're not in the business of making money. We're in the business of providing a level of service to the residents that pay the freight to have those things happen, and we have to do it in a responsible and respectful way of the taxpayer. So if our level's up here and taxpayers say it's too much and they're prepared to take a little bit of a hit here in one particular area, I think we have to look at that. So from my standpoint, I'll be honest with you, I'm sitting on the fence. I think it's better if staff reviews this than it is for council to argue about it and then cut positions or cut program changes that really are more important to staff that we don't know how important they are, because we're just going to be looking at what's on the page. So that's my comment. And I just kind of wanted to say that reality is that I don't think we're behind the 8 ball here, because I think we have kept up. We only cut one position last year, and it wasn't a position that we cut. It was just a position that we didn't add. So that's my comment with respect to this. And quite right, we haven't had an opportunity to delve into the binder. Maybe that's a good thing in some ways, because it also means that I'm not going to be sitting there looking at what things I want to cut out arbitrarily from my perspective. Maybe it's better that staff have another opportunity to look at it and decide what might be able to come out beforehand.
Councillor Thompson and then Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So I'm not sure, maybe my phone number is not posted. I have not received any calls from residents concerned about the percentage increase, but over this past year, I've received phone calls from residents about they want their roads plowed quicker. They want more ditching done. They want the grass is cut in the park and on the trails more. And they want the library open more hours, all of those things which are going to cost more money. I think it's not a good thing not to receive this information tonight. I think I'm willing to receive the information tonight and to do my job next week and come and take the time and review the binder and sit down with staff and to go through it and to hear the reasoning behind it. Some of these positions will actually add income to our, or add revenues to the bottom line. There's two ways of going about a budget, and I haven't been pleased with the last two budgets that we've approved here. And I just really chalk it up to really lack of business experience and maybe lack of budget experience. But I don't think we've done a good job for our residents. And I think that it's time for us to really take a look at, what kind of township do we want? I think that it's important to go through the asks and see where we can actually increase rather than cut. I think we've done a terrible job at economic development. Commercial taxes are really low in our township compared to what residential taxes are. And that's a real simple way that we as a council can influence and protect our residential tax base. As a taxpayer, I think a 14% increase, I hate paying taxes. But I also want my roads plowed. I want the ditching done so our farmers' fields aren't flooding. And I want the grass cut on our trails and in our parks. And that's where I stand on this. I will be approving this tonight.
Counselor Fisher?
Well, we're comparing the municipality, and I wish we were more like this. We're comparing it to a business. Well, if we were running it like a business and we were a true board of directors, we'd be sending this budget back to our departments, right? Which is really what I actually see that we should be doing here. We should be sending this back to our departments and saying, come back to us with something far more reasonable. I agree with the sentiments of the deputy mayor. I'm not an expert in each one of their respective departments, so let it be on them to tell me and the other members of council what you need and what you don't. I think that if we were running it like a business, this is what we should be doing. And going back to what Councillor Thompson just said, Mr. Thompson, you were one of the councillors who said, we need to be negotiating with Barrie over the land boundary and what land they will potentially get. Well, some of that is the land that we would potentially be developing. So some of these positions that you're saying will create revenue, I really don't see that myself, but those are on lands that we don't really know if we'd have them into the future. So I'm not willing to make a bet on that. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
I have Counselor Alexander, and then I'm going to have a comment before I call the vote.
So I'm looking to Councillor Moore for a bit more direction if we don't receive this, because I'm not comfortable just not receiving it and walking away. I don't want to be having these discussions in January and February. I think they're important discussions. I think they have to happen. I have huge concerns about this, and my concern, this is my third time now. I've dived into both budgets. I had conversations with staff about program changes that I thought were too many the first two budgets. And the conversations I had when I asked them to prioritize their asks were, I need them all, which then put it on me to make the decision of, all right, well, I'm not supporting this one. I'm not supporting that one. And again, I don't really know if at the end of the day, I'm choosing the right ones not to support because I'm not in there day to day. I would love to see that prioritization. I would love to have honest, real conversations because I can tell you, and I am only one vote up here. But if we move forward with 14%, I will not approve one of the program changes because I cannot put it up higher than 14%. I cannot put it up to 20%. And I think some of those program changes are necessary. But if we can't have the honest conversations and really look at what's put in front of us, then I just can't. It's too much. So again, sorry, I'm rambling. Councillor Moore, any type of direction around this so we're not just kicking it down the road per se.
Counselor Moore?
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Alexander. I would say we have meetings booked next Wednesday, the following Wednesday. So those are already in our calendar. We will still choose to be at those meetings, but I would ask that staff be able either to provide us with an updated program change list prior to those meetings, or that, you bring them on that day. But I would like to see the meetings continue to move forward. So I think that gives you from now till next week to sit down and look at your asks and come up with something more reasonable. Something email is always fine. You know, we see the agenda, we get a lot of information by email. There's ways to make this happen quickly.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Garwood, what I'm hearing from council is that we want staff to go back and come back with something else. And first off, I would again like to offer that coming forward to a council and the public with a 14% was probably not easy for our staff to do. It is significant, and I don't feel that our staff would be coming forward for anything that they didn't feel our residents wanted or this corporation needs. And we are a corporation. We are a business. And I think that if this council is not willing to accept the 14%, then we need to provide actual direction. During our last budget proceedings, this council at our second last meeting came up with a 2%. We decided at that meeting that we weren't going to accept anything over 2%. So if this council wants to provide direction, and I understand that we're saying, please go away and come back with something different, unless we actually tell them what that difference is, that we need to provide actual direction, because if they come back with 13%, which is still cutting out 100 grand is not something easy. That is a program, that's something. So if this council wants to provide direction to staff to come back with an arbitrary number, we haven't even dove in to see where these numbers come from. We would essentially, in my opinion, we'd be making up a number. We don't know what it takes at this time. So if that's the direction, but simply saying for staff to go away and come back with something different, I think different is going to be different to 7 people. So if we want to have a vote, an amendment, a resolution, actual direction, that we could do. But just saying something different is not moving us forward. I have Councillor Fisher and then more.
I respectfully disagree. I'm not giving them a number to come to simply settle on. I think that they look at each one of their respective departments and find efficiencies, maybe redundancies within the department, do an actual budget, not a shopping list, see how you can save money. And so no, I'm not coming up with a number for them. I think that they run their departments. They report to a CAO. They should come to us with something more reasonable and like you say, it might be different for each one of us, but let that be based upon their numbers and their departments, not me picking a number. There's no basis for us. That would be arbitrary. So no, I won't pick a number. They should come to a number and bring it back to us.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. And that's 14%. The budget, it's not a shopping list. The budget is 14%. So suggest that it's arbitrary. That was a lot of work and a lot of diligence that went into coming up with that 14%.
That's not what I said.
Councillor Fisher. Councillor Moore.
So then I will not pick a number, but I think when I say to come back with something reasonable, it means much less. But again, you'll have to prioritize, and then CAO Schmidt will ultimately have the final decision. But I think for us right now, I'd like to move forward with the vote whether or not to receive the budget today.
And thank you for that. And for clarification, if this council votes not to receive this budget, we still have a corporation to run. We still require a budget. We still require a tax base. We still have to have taxes come forward. So suggesting that we're not going to receive a budget, receive a starting point to move through what that's going to happen. It's different. I have Councillors Garwood. I do see hands. Councillors Garwood and Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I think we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole here. Respectfully, that's what these conversations are intended for. Once we receive the budget, once we have 4 or 5 opportunities over the next month and an entire week next week to meet with staff to have these conversations. Respectfully to some of the comments around the table, it is on us. No one's putting it on us. It is on us. We asked for this job. We ran for this job. We were elected to this job. It is on us. That is the decision that we have to make. Also, I don't want to kick this back to staff and not know what is being cut, because who's going to receive the phone calls? We are. Who's going to hear from concerned residents because their road is not plowed on time, or the grass is now going to be cut every 4 weeks instead of every 2 weeks because there has been resources removed? I want to know that. I'm happy to have the conversation. Let's have it. Let's spend 20 hours having it, because that's what we've done every single year, and that's what we should do. But I want to be able to review a 400-page document and then know what we are cutting. So we are not arbitrarily picking a number, which we did last year, actually. We are not passing it off to somebody else. We are doing our due diligence by reviewing this information and understanding that when and if this council votes to bring that number down, I'm not saying the number's great, because it's not. It's not. But let's have those conversations also, so the community and so the residents, especially that are here tonight or watching online or reach out to us over the next month, know what the level of service is going to be. I truly believe staff, CEO Schmidt mentioned it, how many times, how many discussions that were had. This is the reality. Shopping list, I don't think that's that. Program changes, you could consider a shopping list. You can choose to add something or not to the cart. Well, the cart's pretty full on this one, I understand that. But the reality is things are expensive these days. So let's go through it. Let's accept, let's receive this information, move on, and have our next month worth of budget deliberations. And when we make cuts, then we know how to answer our residents when they come knocking.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I'm not going to take near as long as some people do. I think it's pretty straightforward. We actually want to do what we're elected to do. That's the reason why we're having this discussion. I think it would be reasonable to accept this report, but I would ask as an amendment that staff, because I don't think it's necessarily fair for us arbitrarily to say, well, we're not going to take that program change, but we're going to take this one, then find out later on that staff would have preferred to keep this program change. That's the one that they could have done without. So I would actually suggest that maybe staff come back with scenarios with program changes and different things that would result in maybe a 12%, a 10%, and an 8%. At least that way, there's something for us to work with. There's parameters that staff have provided to us where they're prioritizing their own program changes. That's the amendment I would make. I'm not going to say let's go down to 6%. If they've started at 14, then obviously that's what we're looking at. But maybe there's an opportunity to prioritize, different aspects of the budget where we can come back and say, hey, we can whittle it down to 12. And if we do this, it could be 10. If we do this, it could be 8. At least we have an idea of what program changes are prioritized and what services are prioritized by staff, not necessarily council. That I think is something reasonable that can at least allow us to move forward. That's what I would be suggesting as an amendment, and that we receive the budget.
Thank you. And before I do go to a seconder for this amendment, Director Bedard, any concern with presenting 3 scenarios of a 10, 8, and 12, 10, and 8% scenarios?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. My comment would be this is your budget. The information that you require to pass the budget would be on staff to provide to you and, to satisfy your requirements. If you're looking for such information, we could provide that to you.
Thank you for that. So I do have an amendment put forward by Deputy Cabral that council directs staff to review the 2025 proposed budget and and program changes to provide options for a maximum increase of 12, 10, and 8% blended tax increase. And I'm just going to confirm with Deputy Cabral, was it a blended tax increase or a municipal tax increase?
Well, the blended tax increase is under 12%. We're talking about strictly for our own. That's all we control is our portion of the tax. So this would be based on what we saw here, come back with a 12, a 10, and an 8. you know, you're gonna, slice and dice here, there, like 8's gonna be a lot leaner than 12. But at least it'll give council an opportunity to look at what priorities staff have as opposed to what we might want to cut out.
Thank you. So that council directs staff to review the 2025 proposed budget and provide options for a maximum increase of 12, 10, and 8% tax increase, including prioritizing program changes for the budget deliberations and consideration. So I just need to have that tabled before we have discussion on, so if these are discussions pertaining to the amendment, I just need a seconder for the amendment. I have Councillor Alexander. And questions on the amendment, council? Councillor Fisher?
Just to clarify for myself and those who are watching, these are just starting points, the 10, 12, these are just starting points. It doesn't mean we're necessarily committing to one of those scenarios, correct? So theoretically, it could be 10% and we could cut from there, potentially. Correct?
Yes. Councillor Moore?
Sorry, and then just to be uber clear, the 8%, that is the blended tax rate that would be impacting the tax bill, because that's what people are concerned about, is where? Thank you.
Yeah, and I will turn to Director Bedard, but if the municipality's portion is less than 14%, the 8% would become less and less as it moves forward. Director Bedard?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. We would provide those blended tax rates with each scenario when we present that information to you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Through the chair, I'd be happy to support Deputy Mayor Cabral's amendment. I think that would might save time in these chambers. I would also, during the last two budgets, I took advantage of staff time to come in and to have discussions regarding the budget. And after the budget on each of them, I followed up with staff to see how many other council members came in and spent time trying to understand the budget. And my understanding was very few. I would ask council to take the time to read the binder and to come in and actually talk to staff and ask these questions and to get a lot of this information beforehand, rather than we don't need to get all the information here, and some of it needs to be presented to the public, but most of it can be done one-on-one with staff members, and it will help us understand better and get focused better and get through this process better, in my opinion.
So I have an amendment before us, council, so we will vote on the amendment and then we'll move back to the main motion. That council directs staff to review the 2025 proposed budget and provide options for a maximum increase of 12%, 10%, and 8% tax increases, including prioritizing program changes for budget deliberation and consideration. Council, all those in favor? And that has carried. So that will form part of our main motion, which is simply to receive the budget. Council, so the vote that would be before us now is that council receive the proposed 2025-26 budget and business. Sorry, scroll back up a little bit. Thank you. Business plan dated November 6, 2024, and as amended.
A recorded vote, please.
Thank you. A recorded vote has been requested by Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Councillor Moore has requested a recorded vote. I will just reread the main motion as amended, so everybody's clear. That the report from the Director of Finance regarding the proposed 2025-2026 budget and business plan dated November 6, 2024 be received, and that the proposed 2025 tax-based operating budget, proposed 2025 water operating budget, proposed 2025 wastewater operating budget, and proposed 2025 capital budget as presented November 6 be referred to the special budget meetings of council for deliberation and consideration, and that council directs staff to review the 2025 proposed budget and provide options for a maximum increase of a 12%, 10%, and 8% tax increases, including prioritizing program changes for those budget deliberations and consideration.
Thank you, Clerk Marshall. And at this time, we will move to our recorded vote.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. When I call your name, please state yes or no. Councillor Garwood.
Yes.
Councillor Alexander.
Yes.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes.
Councillor Moore.
No.
Councillor Fisher.
No.
Deputy Mayor Cabral.
Yes.
Mayor Coughlin,
Yes.
and that is carried.
Thank you. Council, we now be moving on to our correspondence and information items. May I have a mover and seconder, please? I have Councillor Garwood and Deputy Cabral. That the resolution regarding the 2025 OPP annual billing statement from the town of Wasaga Beach be received. Are there any questions or discussion on this motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that, sorry, Council, all those in favor? That has carried. We move on now on to item 10. May I have a mover and seconder to receive the Agricultural Advisory Committee resolution for information? Councillor Fisher and Garwood, that the Agricultural Advisory Committee's resolution regarding questions of clarification to the NVCA be received for information. Are there any comments or questions on this? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. Moving on to item 10.2, may I have a mover and seconder for the Agricultural Advisory Committee resolution for information? Councillors Moore and Thompson, that the Agricultural Advisory Committee's resolution regarding the invite to MTO be received for information. Any comments or questions on this? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. We're moving on to our action reports. May I have a mover and seconder for the action reports, please? I have Councillors Thompson and Moore. That action report items 11.2 through 11.10, with the exception of 11.3, be received, and that the recommendations contained therein be approved as presented. 11.2 is Scarlet Line Subdivision Certificate of Substantial Completion. 11.4 is the Facility Lighting Project. 11.5 is the Service Club Meeting Fee Waiver Policy. 11.6 is Airplane Acquisition and Land Donation. 11.7 is the Lifting Restrictions of B1324 12 2nd Avenue. 11.8 is the Springwater Development Corp. of 1256 Wilson Drive. 11.9 is the Memorandum of Understanding for the Township of Springwater Public Library, and 11.10 is the Memorandum of Understanding for the Professional Services for the SSEA. Council, at this time, I'll be asking if there are any to be pulled for redirection at this time. Deputy Cabral?
I'd like to pull 11.5 and 11.9, please.
I have pulled 11.5 and 11.9. Anything further, Council? Councillor Fisher? We have pulled 11.4, 11.5, and 11.9. Not seeing anything, we will move back to our consent approval for 11.2, 11.3, sorry, 11.2 with the exception of 11.3, 11.6, 11.7, 11.8, and 11.10. Council, if there's any comments or questions on the remaining items? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. We will now move on to 11.4, the Facility Lighting Project for Elmville. May I have a mover and seconder for this, please? I have Councillors Fisher and Moore, and I apologize, my head has been turned this way. I'll get back over here, but Councillor Moore, that the report from the Manager of Recreations, Parks and Facility regarding the Facility Lighting Project for Elmville Library dated November 6, 2024 be received, and that council authorize staff to proceed with the Facility Lighting Project Elmville Library as approved through the 2024 capital budget in the amount of $40,419, and that staff be authorized to execute the necessary agreements on that. I have that move a second. Councillor Fisher.
Just a quick comment and maybe a bit of a looking back in history. Last year during our budget, it was proposed that we spend $60,000 on lighting in the Elmville Library. Apparently they needed it and it's justifiable. You know, some councillors pushed back and asked for an actual quote. You know, $60,000 is quite high for lighting. I certainly thought so. I was quite vocal about it. I'm very pleased, and I think that taxpayers should be as well, that we were able to do that for about 2/3 the price of what was proposed last year. So I would just like to highlight, particularly as we come into our budget season, as it's been coined, you know, it is our job to question these expenditures. And, you know, I'm proud that, I'm happy that they got their lighting or they're about to. But also, you know, taxpayers need to know that it is our job sometimes to slow the process and ask for specific amounts or question specific amounts. This is one that I'd like to highlight. $60,000 for lighting. I think many of us up here thought that's a bit arbitrary, $60,000, and it's a bit high. So it's just an example, a real example. Over the course of a year, even with inflation factored in, we were able to get it for 2/3 the price. So, you know, people, residents and taxpayers, voters need to know that this really is what we're charged with during the budget, and I think it's very important. So I'll continue to ask those questions, and I think we all should during the budget.
Thank you. And redirection on this? Councillor Fisher, redirection, this was pulled for redirection?
No, I just wanted to comment on it.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Just a comment, just to make a correction about the $60,000 when it came up last year. It was for lighting and painting. And that was going out to procurement. So this figure would have come back the same anyways. We weren't going to be, the staff had no intention of spending $60,000 on lighting. And I would like to thank Manager Dean for such a great job on this report. The report does clarify that the current library fixtures have reached end of life status. That was a year ago. The current lighting in the library does not meet standard lighting recommendations for a public building, let alone a library. So we could have had this fixed a year ago. That has not changed as well. Would also like to point out, Manager Dean has put in here that there's going to be an additional savings of about $4,000 a year in costs of energy because these are LED lights. And that is a simple payback at current rates is 8 years that'll be paid back. And these fixtures have at least a 30-year lifespan. So this is going to save taxpayers at least $100,000 in electricity bills and fees. So this really is a good example of what staff can do when we get out of their way and let them do their job. I would also like to ask Manager Dean, because this is such a good example and such a good deal for our taxpayers, are there other opportunities in our township in other buildings where this could be applied as well?
Thank you. Manager Dean?
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, and through the rest of council. So as the township considers budget, and as we come forward each year, we do come forward with recommendations through our facility assessment program to do updates and or retrofits to buildings. So energy efficient updates and retrofits are included within requests we do annually. So lighting is a good example for one that will be requested for other buildings as we come forward.
Thank you. Anything further on this, council? All those in favor? And that has carried. We'll now move on to item 11.5. May I have a mover and seconder for the service club meeting fee waiver? I had this pulled by Deputy Cabral, seconded by Councillor Alexander, that the report from the Director of Recreation Parks and Facilities regarding a service club meeting waiver fee policy dated November 6, 2024 be received, and that council approve the service club meeting fee waiver policy attached as Appendix A in the report. And I will turn to Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I want to thank staff for bringing this back up. I did have one concern, however, with respect to the policy itself, and that's number one, where it says be comprised entirely of volunteers. There are volunteer organizations out there that do have paid staff on Kinsman, for example. I think the Lions Club at their upper echelon would have maybe paid staff working in their executive offices. So I'm wondering if there's a way for us to possibly take out entirely and be comprised predominantly of volunteers, just to avoid that little piece there. I was looking at number 5 there and I thought that might cover it off, but I think if we say be comprised entirely of volunteers, we might actually be shutting some service clubs out that may be able to avail themselves of this. Is that something that we could do? Change that, take out entirely and put in predominantly? I think it still covers it. And maybe even the word recognized service club might be sufficient as well. So that's my only comment. I think if we put it through the way it is here, it might be a moot point, but the reality is that if there's a paid position within that organization, they don't qualify.
Director Culver?
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly with the direction of council, an amendment, we can follow that direction and change the word entirely to predominantly or some version thereof that allows for a paid staff to be a part of that organization. I don't think you did. Was there any other changes that you were recommending, or if
No.
that's the case, that's simple?
Just maybe if we put in recognized service club, but no, that's the only piece there that I thought we really needed to kind of maybe change that in order to accommodate service clubs without actually breaching the policy at the same time.
Thank you for that, Deputy Cabral. Clerk Marshall, is that a friendly amendment or would you require formal direction from council on that?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I have drafted a formal amendment that reads that the motion now before council be amended as follows. That the word entirely in criteria point number 1 in the policy be struck out and amended to say predominantly comprised of volunteers in the draft policy.
For that, council, any further comments or questions on the policy before us? Sorry, the amendment that's before us, and do I have that seconded? I need seconder is Councillor Moore. So this is moved by Deputy Corral, seconded by Councillor Moore with the amendment. So we are just now voting on the amendment. All those in favor? And that has carried. And council, we move back to the main motion as amended. That the report from the Director of Recreations, Parks and Facilities regarding the Service Club meeting fee waiver policy dated November 6th, 2024 be received, and that council approve the Service Club meeting fee waiver policy attached as Appendix A to the subject report as amended. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that has carried. Moving on to 11.9. May I have a mover and seconder for the memorandum of understanding for the Township of Springwater Public Library? Councillor Garwood. And Councillor Moore. That the report from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding the memorandum of understanding for the Springwater Township Public Library dated November 6th be received, and that council hereby approves the memorandum of understanding with the Springwater Township Public Library attached as Appendix A, and that a bylaw be presented at the November 6th, 2024 regular meeting of council for final consideration. Are there any comments or questions on this? This was pulled, sorry, Deputy Cabral. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. The reason I asked to have this pulled with respect to the memorandum of understanding is that what I gathered and what I got from the presentation made by the Springwater Township Public Library Board is that they were growing, they were maturing, they wanted to take on a more comprehensive role. And that comprehensive role is going to only enlarge as they move forward. What I have a problem with here is that I don't know whether this was a newly drafted memorandum or if this is an old memorandum, but this is certainly not what I expected. I think a more comprehensive role for the public library would be an overall control of their own budget. And what I see here, and I can't help but notice that the SSEA is on here as well. And on one hand, we're saying that we can accommodate, and then on the other hand, we said that we couldn't accommodate and that someone would have to pay for those services by us hiring a person that they were going to pay for. What I'd like to see here and what I think should have happened is all of these services that are being shown here as no cost, to my way of thinking, they're being buried. They don't truly reflect what the costs are to provide our library services and the library services that the board is providing. I think what should be changed here is that staff should have looked at what the costs were for providing these services, an estimate for the year, and basically provided that data to the library, and the library board should have included it in their ask for the budget. It shouldn't be in a memorandum of understanding where those costs are borne through general operations. That's not the way this should have been, in my opinion. So I would ask that this be referred back to staff and that it come back before council amended, where the costs that are attributable for those services can be estimated and provided to the library board, and that those costs can then be put onto the library's budget as line items for things that they are going to be responsible for. We're not going to make them have any more money or less money, but we're going to actually attribute the true cost of operating our library services where it should be, through the library board, not through our general operational taxation for services that we have here in the township. And the analogy I can make here is we have Aqua. We own the buildings, we own the services, we plow some of the parking lots, and we charge them for that service. And that's exactly what we should be doing with our library board. If they were using a third party, the costs for those services, even the human resources, the staff services that we would be providing, would be borne by the library on a budget line within their own budget. So what I see here is what we were doing. This is not the way we should be moving forward. The library board has made it clear that they want to be able, and it's listed here too, that they are a part of Springwater Township. And I'm not saying a part of, I mean apart from Springwater Township, a board of and onto themselves. So really, we should provide the services, but the services that should be provided, the estimated costs, which staff do all the time, when they are bringing something to us, they estimate the costs for providing any given service, for facilities, for services, for human resources that are utilized. Give that information to the library, and it should be included in the library's budget ask. I can't support this memorandum of understanding in its present form, because what it really does is it buries the true costs for operating our library services, and it just kind of buries them in the operational mix of things. And I think the library board is grown to the point where they should be able to control all of this. It should be sitting on their books. And even though it's an exchange between departments, which we also do, I think we might do services, say, for the fire department, and you balance it out with another department, challenging or charging it back and forth. So I can't support it here. I would like to see it referred back to staff. I would like to see the items here that say at no cost to actually indicate a cost, and have that cost provided to the library board so that it can be placed onto the budget ask when we do our budget deliberations. That's where these funds should be. So I don't know how we can put that into a motion. I'm hoping, CAO Schmidt, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. I think you do. Thank you.
I do have CEO Schmidt. Before that, I do have it here. I just need a seconder for the Councillor Fisher. And I'll turn to CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through you to Deputy Mayor Cabral. So absolutely, I believe I understand exactly the direction that you're providing or you're seeking. What I would just say is that why it's before you tonight is understanding that over the last 30 plus years, we've been working alongside our partners with the public library. We don't have a formal MOU or an agreement with them. And so through some other discussions through myself and CEO Delgado, we felt that now would be a great time to formalize the agreement. And to your point, it's more representative of kind of the relationship as it is today. That said, it's in front of council tonight. If that's the direction that you're seeking, is for us to come back and kind of quantify the cost that the township is for the services that we're providing to the library, and if council wishes to have those pushed on, if you will, to the library, then we're in your hands.
Follow on.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And just to follow on to that, when I read this and I look at it, and then I look down the road several years, and the demands from the library board become greater, we might find ourselves in a position where we're actually hiring staff at the operational level here at the admin center in order to satisfy the needs of the library board. Don't mind doing any of that, but those costs should sit with the library board on their budget. They shouldn't be buried somewhere else. So that's what I'm asking for here. And I think CAO Schmidt understands exactly what I mean. So it's just a matter of, if you look at all of these services as third-party services being provided to the library board, attach a dollar figure to them, and then let's move them over to the library board's budget. And then the library board then can administer it at their end. And everybody knows it's full accountability, full transparency for everybody that, hey, when this is happening, the township's doing it, but the library board's theoretically paying for it out of their budget as opposed to it being buried somewhere else. So that's why I've brought this forth, and I think it's a reasonable thing. I think it's open, it's transparent, and it allows the library board itself to have that autonomy where they're responsible for the expenditures. And if they decide to go to a third party for a particular service, then those funds should be made available to them for them to do that.
Councillor Alexander and then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I actually have a question for Councillor Thompson. I completely think we need to move forward with MOU with the library. I think it's important that everyone understands kind of where the responsibilities lie. We've had much discussion about this up here. I was a bit surprised at this particular MOU is because my understanding, Councillor Thompson, was that March 12th, the library board passed the motion that they wanted to administer their own finances and bring that in-house, or whether the board was doing it or they were hiring third party, but that was the direction that the library was moving, which I completely support. So I was surprised to not have any of that spoken about in here. I feel that we're potentially rushing this in order just to get it done. And I would think we would want to do it properly. So we're not revisiting this in 2 to 6 months. So if you could just provide more information on where you are on that piece.
Okay, I'll turn to Councillor Thompson for comment and CAO Schmidt as well.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Moore, there's been a couple of changes, or sorry, Councillor Alexander. Through the chair to Councillor Alexander, since we took on the financiers, there's been a couple of changes, you know, that staff is unionized, and that slowed the process down a little bit. One of our staff members that is in the union now that was going to take on the finances, the union has told them they can't do that. So again, it's affected the unionization has affected all aspects of the operation. So our goal still is January 1st. So we are still progressing towards that date, but we're just working out some of the details. We're in the process of collective bargaining with the union right now. So well, I'll leave it at that, but we'll see how that works itself out. This MOU should have been done 30 years ago when the library was formed. So it's a pretty standard boilerplate MOU. You'll see there's a clause in there, 30 days. We can change it. We can't. The board can't tell the township to go hire somebody else to do our work without it coming back to council and us approving it. So that protection is in place for council. If you're concerned about it, this is pretty standard. It's pretty common in the Simcoe County. We've always had a partner. The library has always and always will have a partnership with the township, and it's been good up until now. And this is just a pretty standard MOU. There's nothing outlandish in it, and the taxpayer is the same. It comes all out of the same pocket. So I'm happy to if it goes back to the board for changes. That's really at the discretion of council.
We do have the recommendation, or sorry, that the motion be referred to staff, so that the motion now before council be referred to staff to report back on the estimate cost of the in-kind services provided to the Springwater Public Library for the library board to include in their annual budget request. Anything further, Deputy Cabral?
Just a clarification through you to CAO Schmidt. I think that motion would basically cover what we're looking at doing, and that's my only concern. Memorandum is fine. We're still going to be doing the work, but let's show the dollars values where they're being attributed to. Okay, thank you.
So council, we have the amendment before us. So council, all those in favor? And that has carried. We are back to the main motion as amended. So this is the MOU.
Just to refer, it was just
To refer it.
the whole thing
So it's
back,
being
yeah.
referred. Okay, so it's
Yep.
been referred. So we now, council, before we're gonna go through our information reports before we do have a break here. So we have our information reports. May I have a mover and seconder for those, please? Councilors Alexander and Garwood, that the reports listed herein be received for information. One, our building services monthly report, September 24th, 2024, and two, the drainage committee feasibility report. We are going to pull number 3 to be dealt with separately as there is direction provided within that. So we'll deal with number 1 and number 2 and number 3 to be dealt with separately. So if there's anything on number 1 or number 2, council. And not seeing any, so that the information listed herein be received for information. All those in favor? And that has carried, and we'll move back to item number 3. May I have a mover and seconder for that, please? Councilors Garwood and Alexander. And this is with the pedestrian zone traffic signs. So the report items listed herein be received as information, and that the action or the direction contained therein be approved. Councilor Moore?
Thank you. I'd like to speak to this if I could. I've had really good feedback about the bollards in both Stone Manor subdivision and Stone Gate subdivision. People have really noticed that the speed has been reduced, so I would concur with what the report says. They're just asking for bollards for those 3 school zones, I believe. But I'd like to reserve, I've had a request for the Snow Valley Highlands area for speed reduction bollards as well. So I'd like to add, if I could, the Snow Valley Highlands. I don't have the exact location, but maybe we could just keep it at that, and I can get back to you and talk about the exact location.
And thank you for that. And this report speaks to those 3 specific locations. And
Yeah.
I think that if we begin adding locations, I think each ward is going to add probably 2 or 3 locations onto that this evening. So I don't know if we want to have that as an item for future consideration so that we can deal with this appropriately, because I think that they have been effective and the community has embraced them quite well. And I know that we would like to scatter them across the entire municipality, but that does come with a cost. So I don't know if that wants to be an amendment on this, or if you'd like to bring that forward as something separate.
No, I'd like to propose an amendment for the set of bollards for Snow Valley Highlands,
Okay.
please.
And the amendment for the Snow Valley Highlands, at this time, council, are there any other locations that we would like to have included with that? Councillor Fisher and Councillor Garwood?
Sorry, I would actually like to bring a few at a later date for mine. I just want to speak to a few residents, but I will support Councilor Moore. But I agree, I probably have a few. I think I'm looking across the table, but I'll bring mine forward at a later date.
Councillor Garwood?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Echoing off of Councillor Fisher's comments, I will also bring 1 or 2 at a future date, and we can connect on that. But what I do want to specifically speak to right now is the report. First, I wanted to thank, I want to get the title right here, Senior Engineering Technologist Eberhart for the report. I know this initially was a motion that Councillor Fisher and I believe brought forward last year. And echoing other members of council, I've heard a ton of great feedback, especially in the school zone. So I'm really pleased to see the other 3 schools being added to the list. Forest Hill, Minising, and Hillsdale all deserve them equally as our other schools do as well. Just a few highlights, and I know the report's many pages and there's lots of numbers here, but I think one of the most common things that we collectively hear about is obviously traffic calming measures, right? Especially in some of our more compact areas of the municipality. So speaking to the report, just a few highlights that in the 85th percentile of speeds, again, so traditionally probably where a lot of us are driving within the speed limit within these 50-kilometer-an-hour spaces, 7% of speed was reduced with having these implemented. In addition to that, when we are looking at areas that the speed is a lot higher. That max speed reported, it was 14.2% speed decrease. So again, fantastic. Again, I've spoken to staff significantly about this and understanding that these have worked, and I'm excited to see them grow across the municipality. We have 3 in Elmvale. One of them we had to relocate due to some parking concerns. And again, I appreciate the community bringing those concerns forward and staff working with us as we sort out appropriate locations. But I'm excited to see this moving forward. It's cost effective. And clearly we're not the only municipality that's doing this, but more and more in the region are jumping on board. So I'm happy to see council support this initiative.
Maybe that Councillor Fisher.
Just a quick mention of it. I think when we look at traffic calming, there's no one solution to it, you know, but I think when we embarked on this this form of traffic calming, and again, it's not the one, you know, fix all solution, but I really like having some data back on it because you know, if the data suggested otherwise, well, then get rid of them, right? They didn't work, but I think they were effective in my ward. You know, I've talked to people, and frankly, I've had mixed reviews, right? So it's nice to have the data back on it, and but I have also had multiple people say I would like it on my street, you know, and some of them do warrant it. So you know, I do enjoy having the report back because, you know, we have some factual data on it, and so we know that what I really viewed maybe a little bit as an experiment at first has proven to be successful to some degree. But I think there's more work to be done, and I think that there are other forms of traffic calming to also look at in the area as well to expand upon it. Thank you.
All right, so I do have an amendment put forward by Councillor Moore, and I just need a seconder for that, please. I have Councillor Fisher. So that this is that staff be directed to install traffic bollards in Snow Valley Highlands at a location to be determined. Okay. And before I do call the vote, I will not be supporting the amendment. First of all, there is no actual location or traffic data to assist with that. And as we've heard from members of council tonight, this initiative, this pilot project has been successful and our residents have welcomed it. And I think that if we are going to move forward with additional locations outside of the 3 school locations, it should be a wholesome approach to it. So it's not that I don't think that we shouldn't be moving forward with this. We also had a lengthy decision or discussion about our budget and not knowing this location and not knowing anything about it, I won't be able to support it. So council, all those in favor of the amendment, please. And that has carried. And we'll move back to the main motion. And Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I'm going to be supporting this, but I do want to point out that there is a traffic calming policy in place, and it seems to me that we're circumventing that traffic calming policy going forward. Either the policy is in existence and we're going to be following it, or we're not, because what's happening now is we seem to be just, if we get a complaint, then we're just putting them in place. We don't have the data. We don't have the community reaching out. We're not following our own policy is what I'm saying. So I'm just saying, like, are we going to follow our policy going forward? Are we just going to keep putting these bollards up all over the place whenever someone thinks that they're useful? So I'm not against the bollards. I'm supporting it tonight, but I really need to know going forward, are we going to be following our own policy or are we not going to be following the policy? Because if we're not going to follow it, then let's repeal it.
Thank you, Deputy Cabral. And I guess I'm just going to ask for clarification on that. So as amended, we chose a location that wasn't in consistency with our policy, or potentially not, because we didn't do any research to find out, and we're not following it. So council just approved not following the policy. I just wanted to make sure, because what you just said, I feel is contradictory to what I.
No, Mayor Coughlin, the first time this came up, that's exactly what happened. We did not follow our policy. We put those bollards in place, but we did not follow the policy at that time. But council voted to move forward with it. Now that we're doing this again, I just want to know, are we going to follow the policy or are we not? If we're not going to follow it, let's repeal it and let whatever traffic calming measures that we want to be put in place be up to council as a whole, but be brought forth by the ward councillor or a member of council. That's all. It's an irregularity that needs to be corrected.
Okay, so it's that council endorse the use of traffic bollards as a viable traffic calming measure as per the guidelines within the approved township traffic calming policy, and that staff continue to analyze the traffic patterns and traffic data to determine when traffic calming measures, including traffic bollards, are warranted as per the approved township traffic calming policy, and furthermore that staff install traffic bollards within the remaining 3 schools of Forest Hill, Minising Central, Hillsdale Elementary, that in the commencing in 2025, and that staff be directed to install traffic bollards in the Snow Valley Highlands area at a location to be determined. Council, all those in or comments on that? Sorry, Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just a general comment. Thank you. Just back to other comments on the table. Yes, the traffic calming policy is in place, and yes, most of the time I'd say it is followed. Last year we also approved 4 crossing guards in the municipality that were not warranted, and the majority of this council choose to implement them. They weren't warranted, and I think they've done a great job. They've been extremely helpful in my community. There's 2 of them. Again, I completely support following the policy, but I also understand there are scenarios where council can connect with the community and have those conversations. I will say, for example, staff have been absolutely excellent when discussing traffic calming measures within the community, but also understanding we often have these great concerns that sometimes don't meet a warrant on a piece of paper, respectfully. But there's major concern, and it's not just from one person, it's from 100 people. So I think it's that balance. I'm happy to continue ensuring the policy is utilized, so that also aids staff and when these concerns come forward, but also see the benefit of these one-off conversations and at least them coming back to the table for a discussion.
Councillors Fisher and Deputy Cabral.
Just a quick word. I actually totally agree with what Councillor Garwood and our deputy mayor said, although they may seem a bit different. You know, I think we do need to adhere to the policy as much as possible. That being said, I think sometimes to deal with a situation, it's almost like an executive order of council in a way. You know, I know speaking for my ward, traffic and speeding and frankly, cottage country traffic darting through has become a massive concern around the school. So sometimes I think, you know, I guess this is how I justify maybe circumventing the bylaw a bit. You know, sometimes we really need to act quickly on something and do something. So, you know, I think that's what we did in that case. But actually, an excellent point with the crossing guards. I think we, you know, we made that happen. I think it's to the betterment of the community, and I think maybe we did it with anecdotal evidence, right? People in the community telling us exactly what they needed and us answering it. So, you know, maybe we did circumvent it, but I think sometimes you do it for the betterment of the community. That's my 2 cents.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you very much. I love the 2 cents. When we talk about the warrant for the crossing guards, let's keep in mind that we actually followed the warrant. And after we found out that the warrant was not satisfied, council then determined that they would install crossing guards. There's a big difference between that and what we're seeing here. What we're seeing here is we're not following the policy. We're doing it preemptively. We're not looking at it. It's different if we follow the policy and it's not warranted and then council as a whole decides, I think we're still going to do it. So if you're going to compare apples to apples, compare apples to apples. We followed the policy in one case and then decided to go with crossing guards. We didn't follow the policy in this case, yet we're still putting in bollards. If you want to follow the policy and then put in bollards, that's fine. I get it. But at least if we're going to follow the policy and then overturn it because we're not happy with the result, I can support that. I'm supporting it tonight. I'm finding it a bit tough to think about a policy that's sitting there that we could have followed, and if we didn't like the result, we could still put the bollards in, but we're just not even bothering with it. And to suggest that there was urgency, I hate to say this, Counselor Fisher, because you and I do see eye to eye quite a bit. I don't agree with you there. There was no urgency. We could have gone through the process. Matter of fact, I think speed bumps might have worked better in some cases, but that,
We are not opening discussion this evening for speed bumps. We had enough of that in the last term. So, council, if there's anything more specific to the bollards and the report that's before us, we do have it amended. And I have read if anybody requires that further, all those in favor? And that has carried. So at this time, council, before we move on to our verbal reports, we will be taking a break, and it is now 8:40. So returning at 8:55, 8:55, please. And moving on to our verbal updates, I will turn to Director Heron for a development update.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 5 quick updates for council and the public. For the Carson Road Midhurst Valley Neighborhood 1, there are 2 updates. Am I going too fast?
No, not at all.
For the mixed subdivision, top course asphalt has been placed. And for those of us who are not engineers, top course is the second and final course of asphalt to finish the roads. And this winter, Public Works will be plowing the roads in the mixed subdivision and sidewalks for the first time. Residents have been notified with a newsletter outlining the requirements for no overnight parking per township bylaws. And the second update for Neighborhood 1, the expansion of the Midhurst Valley Water Plant to provide water for Dehickling and Thompson lands is anticipated to be completed by January 2025, so in a couple of months. For neighborhood number 2, being the Gill Road and Midhurst Heights neighborhood, the contractor continues to work on the storm outfall on Gill Road, and the work is expected to be completed by the end of November. Second item is the water treatment plant and sewage pump station construction is progressing in anticipated completion in the fall of 2025, so about a year from now. And then finally, the last update, the installation of the sanitary force main work continues on Snow Valley Road. The County of Simcoe have outlined that as of November 15th, that all work will need to be completed to allow for winter maintenance. The contractor is exploring options to micro tunnel under Highway 2627 at Snow Valley Road and Finley Mill Road. And there we have it.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Heron? Deputy Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through you to Director Heron. With regards to the mixed road development, am I to assume that township has assumed those roadways, or is this under contract with the mixed development developer and we're being compensated for the plowing?
Director Heron?
Thank you, Your Worship, and to the Deputy Mayor. It is the latter. The road has not been assumed yet, and the township is clearing the roads under contract.
Okay. And Council, we will now move on to municipal updates. I will start with Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Cogwin. I just wanted to highlight the fantastic tours that council took last week in Ward 4. We toured the newly renovated Grenfell Hall, which was received well. And our friend, Mr. Doyle, did a great article in Barrie Today about that, really trying to bump up some visibility and rental opportunities. And we also toured the We Do Dadawin Lookout, which also received very well, and hopefully council will find a way to support that project ongoing.
Thank you. And moving along to this side, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I would like to draw attention to the Friends of Library silent auction that's taking place. It's been going on for about a week. It ends February the 14th, so there's 5 days left. There's over 80 items. They're great items that you can bid on. I would encourage the public, each of you, to go on and to make a bid. I have to say that my feelings are a little bit hurt here. I'm a driftwood artist, and I put a piece of driftwood art on the auction, and it is yet to have a bid. So I am petitioning somebody out there to make a bid on my art for the library, please. Thank you.
And moving along to the side, municipal updates, Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just a few things I wanted to mention. First, Elmville District High School had a pretty neat opportunity a few weeks ago. For a 2-week span, there was a birch bark canoe being built in the outside atrium of the school. I had the opportunity to visit the canoe going into the Wye River directly behind the school. For those of you who maybe haven't been behind the school, the Wye River goes directly right behind EDHS. It's a beautiful space. So it was pretty neat to see Chuck Commanda, his group, all of the students out, the school board, etc. So it was a really neat opportunity to experience right here or right there in Elmville. The second item I wanted to discuss was the Remembrance Day banners on Queen Street in Elmville. For the 5th year, Queen Street proudly displays banners honoring our local veterans. This initiative, launched in 2020, is in partnership with the Elmvale Legion and the Elmvale BIA, and of course, the Township of Springwater. You can stroll down Queen Street and see those banners each year. I believe there's roughly 30 to 36 banners that are added. And from what I understand, we've almost made our way through the inventory that are of photos and servicemen and women that are proudly displayed at the Elmvale Legion. So it's a pretty incredible opportunity. I see lots of other municipalities and communities starting to do something along those lines. So thank you to the Legion and staff and the BIA for that continued partnership. And the last thing, I wanted to thank Councillor Moore for the tour at the We Duk Dadawin lookout. Something interesting that we learned while we were there. We Duk Dadawin means working together and helping one another in the Ojibwe language. So I was proud to be a part of that, and it's a hidden gem. It's just incredible. I've already said to my family, we're loading up the kids and we're going there for an afternoon. And of course, visiting the Grunfell Hall, which looks great.
And if there's no further updates, we will move on now to our notices of motion. So we have two notices of motion to which motion has been given. I have the first notice is regarding the donation from the Huronia Centennial Elementary School Mindful Mornings program, moved by Councillor Garwood, and looking for a seconder on this, please. Councillor Alexander, and I will now turn to Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Whereas the School Council of Huronia Centennial Elementary School hosts mindful mornings for students of all ages and grades to ensure no child has to ever worry about being hungry while learning at school. And whereas the program has been operating for 2 days per week since 2023, with over 500 meals and snacks served per week. And whereas in the past the program was fully funded, which is no longer available, prompting the School Council to commence community fundraising. Be it therefore resolved that council hereby approve a donation of $1,000 to the Huronia Centennial Elementary School Mindful Mornings program to be funded from the Ward 1 discretionary fund. If I can speak to this just a bit further, the school council, in my opinion, has done an excellent job at trying to fill a void. For the last few years, there's been an opportunity to receive a significant grant that unfortunately was not available this year. This program is a school council initiative, so it's run by that volunteer group of parents, and they have been connecting with community businesses and community groups trying to continue to fund this program. So when I received their fundraising letter to see their initiatives, the effort put behind it, and the good work that it does in that school and for our community, 500 meals a week is just absolutely incredible. I absolutely had to say yes to this. So I'm hopeful to utilize my discretionary fund for this purpose. I believe this is the second request that has come forth from this fund, so there's still funds left in the fund.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And I hate to bring up policy, but I'm not sure about this, Councillor Garwood, and I'm just not sure about it. I thought there was something in there about donating funds, but maybe you've checked it and you can, because all I was going to do is say if it doesn't come out of there, I was going to make a friendly amendment that if it's not available from your fund, that it come from the Springwater swing. But if you've checked it, that's fine. That's my concern.
Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Deputy Mayor Cabral. I appreciate the question. Yes, I did confirm with Director Ainsworth that this did meet the policy, and Clerk Marshall had also confirmed that. So I hope that answers the question.
Not seeing anything further at this time. Council, all those in favor? And that has carried. We will now move on to 14.2, and this is regarding our Veterans Crosswalk in Elmvale, moved by Councillor Garwood, and seeking a seconder for this, please. Deputy Cabral, and I will turn now to Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. That council endorsed the creation of a Veterans Crosswalk at Queen Street and Mariah Street in Elmvale, leading up to the Cenotaph for Remembrance Day in 2025, and that staff be directed to investigate further and report back to council on potential options and funding partners. This opportunity was actually brought to me by a few community members. Recently, there's been a lot of really positive news in other municipalities across the province. The town of Amherstburg, Chatham-Kent, Stony Creek within the city of Hamilton have all recently implemented or will be unveiling their Veterans Crosswalk this week or next leading up to Remembrance Day. I think this dovetails off of what I just spoke about in municipal updates around the partnership with the Elmvale Legion and the banner program down Queen Street. It all ties in nicely to the Elmvale Cenotaph. Also timely, as Remembrance Day is only a few days away. Understanding that these projects take time and can't be done overnight. I want to ensure it's done the right way. Again, of course, to honor those who have served our country and remember those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice to our community and to our country. So that is the goal here. Again, very high level at this time, really just looking for an endorsement of the plan and for council, for staff to come back with additional information and funding partners, which I will mention has already overwhelmingly been mentioned that there seems to be a lot of community interest in regards to funding this.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just a friendly amendment to Councillor Garwood's motion here. I'd like to include the word costs so that when it does come back, not only do we have an opportunity to move forward, but there's opportunity to know what we're moving forward to, what kind of money's involved. So hopefully you're amenable to that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we'll just leave that as a friendly amendment. So potential options, costs, and funding partners. More about that. Council, all those in favor? And that has carried. Are there any additional items, notices of motion this evening? Not seeing any items for future consideration. And not seeing any, we'll move on to our bylaws. May I have a mover and seconder for our bylaws, please? I have Councillors Thompson and Moore that the bylaws listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. We have 2024-087 Development Charges Bylaw, 2024-088 Fees and Charges Amendment Scheduled F Recreation Fees, 2024-089 a Memorandum of Understanding with the Severn Sound Environmental Association. And we have referred 2024-090, so that will be dealt with at a future date. So we have the three bylaws before us. Any questions or comments on those? All those in favor? And that has carried. Our confirmation bylaw. Councillors Garwood and Deputy Cabral, that bylaw 2024-091 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the regular meeting held on November 6th, 2024, listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? And that has carried. And a mover and seconder for our adjournment, please. I have Councillors Fisher and Alexander that the regular meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 9:10 p.m. to meet again in regular meeting on November 20th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Thank you.